Abyssal Murmurs. Hello everyone. Today we will come to the next 13 horror stories. Let's start. Story 1. Your son or your husband. This is a story my aunt told us. One that happened to her aunt many years ago. It's not scary, but it's undeniably tragic. Please be kind in your responses, as everyone deserves the chance to share their story, no matter how it sounds. For the sake of this retelling, my aunt will be named Mai. It was back in Laos, when Mai was just 12 years old. Now, she's around 50 or so this happened a long time ago. Her aunt was pregnant with her first child, and the time for her to give birth was drawing near. Around that same time, her husband suddenly became very sick. He grew weak, bedridden, and unable to even eat. After about a week or two of this, Mai's aunt's father-in-law decided to seek out a shaman for help, as it seemed nothing else was working. It was raining heavily the day the shaman came to perform the ritual. As the shaman began his rituals, Maui and a few other family members gathered in the room. Suddenly, Ma's aunt clutched her stomach in pain just as the shaman finished his chants. He turned to her and said, "Your husband's spirit has left his body and entered the baby inside of you. You must now choose either your husband lives or your baby lives. You can't have both." Mai's aunt was devastated. She begged the shaman to help her, saying she wanted to save them both. But the shaman shook his head and told her it was already too late. She was too far along in her pregnancy, and now it was one or the other. She wept in agony as her stomach pains worsened. After hours of crying, she finally made the heartbreaking decision. "I want my husband," she whispered through her tears. The shaman told her if she chose her husband, she had to go into the forest, give birth there, and kill her baby. She couldn't return until someone came to retrieve her. With a heavy heart, Mai accompanied her aunt into the forest. The rain hadn't stopped, pouring down harder as they walked deeper into the trees. As the contractions grew unbearable, her aunt collapsed to the ground. Unable to go any farther, she laid down and started pushing. Beside her was a large puddle formed by the relentless rain. After her son was born, her aunt took the newborn baby, laid him face down in the puddle, and watched as he drowned. As soon as she had done it, she forced herself to her feet and began running back toward the village. "Niam Daksaum, don't go. The baby is crying," Mao yelled after her. But her aunt didn't answer. She just kept running, crying as she made her way back home. Mai didn't know what to do. She couldn't just leave the baby like that, but she had no choice. She followed her aunt, her heart heavy with fear and sadness. It wasn't long before they reached the village. Her aunt ran straight into the house, throwing the door open. Inside, everyone was gathered around her husband's bed, the shaman still chanting. Her grandmother turned and saw her. "Naya, why didn't you follow the instructions?" she scolded, but her aunt didn't care. All she could do was rush to her husband's bedside. "My love, are you okay? Have you recovered?" she cried. But when she looked at him, she saw the saddest expression cross his face before he closed his eyes for the last time. His chest stopped rising. He was gone. The shaman sighed and shook his head. "I told you to wait in the forest until someone came for you," he said. "You were supposed to wait for the baby to die, so his spirit could return to your husband's body. But because you didn't listen, his spirit has now left both bodies. You have lost them both." Her aunt collapsed in despair, sobbing uncontrollably. There was nothing anyone could do. Later, they went back to the forest to retrieve the baby, and both the child and her husband were buried the same day. 2 months later, unable to cope with the grief of losing her husband and her son, Mai's aunt took her own life. Story 2. I got poked. Back in 2010, my sister and brother-in-law lived in an apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Meanwhile, my family and I lived in St. Paul, MN. My sister had some terrifying experiences with whatever was in her apartment. She told us about a little white girl, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, who came to her and pulled on her spine. It happened twice, and she was absolutely terrified. My parents, Grandma, and I decided to visit her to see for ourselves. We arrived at my sister's apartment around 9 p.m., walked in. My parents and Grandma didn't feel anything unusual, but I immediately got that cold, shivering feeling. I tried to ignore it. After we ate and went through our nightly routines, we settled in for sleep. That's when it happened to me. We all slept in the living room. There were 2 couches, one long, one short, where my grandma and dad slept. My mom and I were on the floor. The kitchen was right across from us, with a small hallway leading off to the side. It was around 2 a.m., and I couldn't fall asleep, still feeling that eerie sensation. Then I heard the toilet flush. I assumed it was just the pipes or something. 10 minutes later, it flushed again. That's when the fear started creeping in. I began to sense someone standing in the hallway. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a child running quickly from the hall to the kitchen. My fear skyrocketed. I pulled the blanket over my head, heart racing, breathing hard. After about 15 minutes of silence, I was overheating under the blanket and needed air. Cautiously, I peeked out from under the covers. As soon as I did, I heard a little girl's laugh. Out of nowhere, I felt something rush up to my face, blow air on me, and then poke me right on my forehead. I was terrified, frozen in shock. Immediately, I slid over to my mom's chest, sweating and shaking. She woke up, told me to move because it was too hot, and I just kept saying, "No, no, no, no." My mom realized something was wrong. She wrapped her arms around me, and somehow we both managed to fall asleep. By 4 a.m., I woke up again and noticed my mom's arm wasn't around me anymore. I glanced over and saw her lying on her stomach, but something strange was happening. Her legs were twitching. At first, I thought she was just moving in her sleep, but then I saw it. At the foot of our bed, there she was, a little white girl, dressed in an old-fashioned blue skirt and bonnet. She was playing with my mom's feet, lifting them up in the air, letting them drop, and laughing as she did it. I was paralyzed with fear, not knowing what to do. I stayed awake until 7 a.m. watching, too scared to move, before finally drifting off for 2 hours. By then, the girl had disappeared. The next morning, I told my sister everything. She told my parents, but they didn't believe me. My mom admitted she felt something strange, but she couldn't believe that a little girl had been playing with her feet. My dad and grandma dismissed it, insisting there was nothing wrong. My grandma reassured me, saying she'd pray for me, and gave me her cross necklace and Bible to sleep with. I didn't want to stay another night in that apartment, but I had no choice. We were staying for 2 nights. The second night, I put on headphones and fell asleep with the Bible under my pillow. Thankfully, nothing happened. A month later, my sister and brother-in-law moved out of the apartment. The Hong elders always say that if your spirit is strong, the spirits will be afraid of you. I guess mine wasn't strong enough, and that's why it happened. Even now, when I tell this story, I get chills. Stay strong in spirit, you guys. Story 3. The Mother Fox. When I was young, my family moved to a small farm on a couple acres of land. The farm itself was simple. A small red barn and a gated square about the size of a city pool. We didn't have any big farm animals, just ducks, pigeons, and chickens. Despite being new to farming, we were doing well, except for one persistent problem, a fox. We didn't have a dog yet because my dad was worried it might go after the birds too. Being new to this, he didn't have time to train one. We were just settling in, and the birds were our main focus. My siblings and I did our best to keep them safe. However, this fox wasn't like others. It wasn't afraid of us. It would come out of the forest, sit at the edge, and just watch. The birds would panic, and we had no idea how to herd them back. Every time, the fox would manage to snatch one or more. At the time, my brother and I were young, both under 10, so facing a fox wasn't something my dad wanted us to do. Foxes aren't small compared to kids, and the risk of getting bitten was too great. Being the typical Hmong, a natural hunter, my dad took matters into his own hands. He tracked and killed the fox to protect our birds and, of course, us. We thought that was the end of it, that our birds were finally safe. But soon after, something strange started happening. The birds began getting sick, one after the other, and no matter what we did, they kept dying. My dad was worried it might be the bird flu, so he called a vet. But the vet couldn't find anything wrong with them. We tried everything: better feed, clean water, medicines, but nothing worked. The birds just kept dying. The stress wore on my dad, and my parents began arguing over the money they'd spent and how everything seemed to be going wrong. One day, while playing outside, my brother and I noticed something odd. A line of dead birds stretched from the barn toward the forest, almost like a trail of breadcrumbs. There were about 10 or 20 birds, spread out in a connect-the-dots pattern. Curious, we followed the trail toward the forest. As we approached, we saw a beautiful red fox with 3 small kits behind her. We froze in place, too scared to move. A mother fox is nothing to mess with, especially when protecting her babies. Suddenly, we understood. Another fox was hunting our birds, likely to feed her young. We were about to run back to tell Dad when I insisted on looking at the babies one last time. They were so cute, I didn't want to leave just yet. My brother hesitated, but stayed with me for a moment. But then, something even stranger happened. The foxes didn't move. They simply faded away. One moment, they were there, and the next, their bodies became transparent, like ghosts, before disappearing completely into the forest. My brother and I looked at each other, screamed, and ran back to the house as fast as we could. We didn't stop screaming until we were inside, with the door locked behind us. Our parents were waiting for us, ready to scold us, but our terrified faces must have told them something was wrong. My dad, annoyed, yelled at us in Hmong, asking what kind of trouble we'd gotten into. We told him what we saw. His face went pale. Without saying much, he told us we were good kids and then hurried off to call our grandma. He told us to stay inside with our mom and not to worry. My mom turned on the TV and told us to sit down and stay put until Dad returned. To make a long story short, we later learned from my grandma, who is a shaman, that the fox my dad had killed was a mother. She had been pregnant with 3 kids. My dad hadn't known that when he shot her. He only realized it when he went to dispose of the body and saw the movement of the unborn kits inside her. My dad had killed her to protect our birds, thinking he was doing the right thing. But the mother fox hadn't been hunting out of malice. She had only been trying to feed her babies, just as my dad was trying to provide for us. According to my grandma, the mother fox spirit was angry. She had taken her revenge by making our birds sick and die, to show my dad the pain she felt when her own children were taken from her. My grandma performed a ceremony for the fox and her babies, burning paper money as an offering. My dad took my grandma to the spot where he had thrown the fox body, where we had seen the ghostly fox and her kits. It was only after this ceremony that the birds stopped getting sick and the strange occurrences ended. From that day forward, my dad never killed anything on our property again, except for maybe the occasional mouse or rat that made its way into the house. And yes, he finally got a dog, a well-trained one. Story 4. Woman in Black. This isn't too scary, just creepy to me. My friend worked at a hotel, and I asked her if I could come use the hot tub and pool for free. She said yes, so I went. There was no one else in the pool or hot tub area, so I had the whole place to myself. About an hour and a half later, a woman dressed in black entered. There was a bathroom in the pool area, and she went straight in to use it. Afterward, she came out and sat by the hot tub. Now, she didn't get into the hot tub. She just sat on the ledge with her feet dangling in the water. I didn't pay much attention to her. She seemed like just another guest using the pool area, so it didn't feel strange at the time. Not even 5 minutes later, she got back up and went into the bathroom again. While this was happening, I was lounging on the beach chairs, just scrolling through my phone, minding my own business. After a bit, I went back into the hot tub, then returned to the chairs. I did a few things here and there, but she never came out of the bathroom. About half an hour passed, and she was still in there. Eventually, I texted my friend at the front desk. There's a lady who's been in the bathroom for over 45 minutes. Can you come check on her? She replied, sure, and came over. When she arrived, she knocked on the bathroom door, then opened it. The bathroom was pitch black, the lights off. No one was inside. Now, this bathroom was a single stall setup with a shower. There was only one way in and out. I looked at her, and she looked at me. We both knew what we were dealing with. I quickly got dressed, and we left the pool area. To exit the pool area, you have to walk down a long hallway. As we were walking back, my friend said, I didn't want to tell you earlier while you were in there because I didn't want to scare you, but when I was coming down the hall toward the pool, I heard a woman laughing. I think it was her laughing at us for thinking she was still in the bathroom. Now that I think about it, I didn't have my glasses on, so I never saw her face, just her hair and body. Story 5. Village Girl. By Anonymous. When my dad was still a young man, he and 3-4 of his friends would visit different villages to talk to girls. They met one girl, but it wasn't anything serious, just casual conversation. Afterwards, they returned home. The following year, they went back to that same village to see if the girl was still there. When they arrived at the old house, they found that neither the girl nor her family was there anymore. My dad and his friends asked the villagers what had happened to the family. The people told them that the girl had passed away, and her parents had moved away after that. My dad and his friends continued to wander around the village, and before they knew it, it had already gotten dark. They all agreed that it was too late to go home, so they decided to spend the night and return in the morning. Sometime in the middle of the night, my dad felt someone touching his head. He turned to his friend and said, "Hey, why are you touching my head?" His friend replied, "I didn't touch you." My dad wasn't scared at that point. A little while later, his friend asked, "Hey, why did you touch my head?" My dad answered, "I didn't touch you either." They all started hearing what sounded like someone walking around outside the house. They peeked outside, and there she was, the girl they had spoken to the year before. But now, she was decaying, and she no longer looked human. The girl disappeared around the corner of the house. A moment later, they saw her peeking into the house again. They watched as her hand reached through a hole in the wall of the straw house, reaching out as if to grab them. My dad and his friends immediately bolted out of the house and ran away. Story 6. Broken Mirror. When my husband and I first got married, we moved into these newly renovated apartments. It felt like home new, clean, with a beautiful view of the creek and forest. My husband is sensitive to the paranormal, so he'll usually tell me if he senses or sees spirits. A few weeks passed, and we went shopping for some home decor. We also have a daughter, SEU, from his previous marriage. While we were out, I thought it would be nice to get her a mirror. She's a preteen, and I figured it would be a great addition to her room. She was excited when we brought it home. I told her to pick a spot, and I'd hang it up for her. We decided to hang it behind the closet door because she had a large walk-in closet. The next morning, while I was cooking, S came out to tell me that her mirror had broken. We were both shocked and had no idea what could have caused it. So, we threw the mirror away. A few days later, my husband told me that he had started seeing things, especially in our bedroom. He said there was a presence that just stood there throughout the night, watching. I was like, WTF. I get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. He told me that I usually walked right past it. He hadn't wanted to tell me because he knew I would freak out, and, of course, I did. He also mentioned hearing noises late at night, like pots and pans clattering and someone rummaging around in the kitchen. Needless to say, we broke our lease and moved out shortly after. Not the scariest story, but I wanted to share. Story 7. The Watcher. This happened back in 2017 on a Saturday. My friends were coming over to my house to play D&D, also known as Dungeons and Dragons. I was the DM Dungeon Master, or referee, for the campaign I was running. We always played in my basement. About 1 or 2 hours into the session, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, near the staircase that led upstairs. I turned to look directly at it, and saw a fuzzy, black outline of a bald figure with no facial features. As soon as I saw it, the figure jerked back quickly, like someone who'd been caught peeking. My friend R also glanced toward the same spot. I asked him, "Did you see that?" He replied, with a straight face, "Don't worry about it." So I shrugged it off and went back to DMing the game. A month later, during R's bachelor party thrown by his stepdad, something strange came up again. R's grandfather, who had passed away, had been a shaman, and R mentioned that his grandfather had passed down psychic abilities to his grandkids. Apparently, R could see, hear, and sense paranormal things. We were all drinking and having a good time, especially I, since he was the bachelor. We were giving him shot after shot. That night, I asked him, "Hey, do you remember that day we both looked at the stairs and you told me it was nothing? Was something there?" His drunk self blurted out, "Yes." I was buzzed, so I started freaking out, yelling, "Holy see!" Then told me, "There are 2 spirits in your house. The one you saw probably wandered in because you've lived there for so long, since October 2005. It's not dangerous, it's just curious about what you all do. But the other one, it has dark energy, and it's attached to your mom. That one doesn't bother anyone except her." Ever since he told me that, every now and then, I'd catch glimpses of it peeking from behind a wall. a corner, or the bathroom door. And every time, when I saw it, it would quickly jerk back, trying to stay hidden. I think my nephews have noticed it too, but I tell them not to worry about that one because it's not dangerous and won't harm them. Also, later on, R told us that he ended up with an ulcer from all the mixed drinks we gave him that night. We basically cleaned out his stepdad's liquor collection. I have other stories too, and I'll write them out to share here later. Story 8. Venting. This happened earlier, in September 2012. My mother-in-law sells vegetables at the farmer's market. Every Friday night for the past 10 years, she'd prepare everything for Saturday's sale. She'd stay up all night in the garage, docked wide open, until my father-in-law got home around 11 p.m. to help finish bundling the flowers. But something strange happened one particular night. My husband works the third shift, and before leaving, he always checks which car is available. Around 10 p.m. as he was about to leave, my mother-in-law suddenly rushed to the front door right next to the garage and asked, "Who's outside?" Confused, my husband told her, "No one." But she kept insisting, asking if it was my sister-in-law, his sister. We were both puzzled. My sister-in-law and I were sitting in the living room, and she hadn't gone outside. Still shaken, my mother-in-law explained she saw someone run past the big garage door. Whoever it was moved so fast she couldn't make out their face, but she was certain it looked like a girl, about 5 feet tall, wearing shorts. 2 cars were parked in front of the garage, and she said just before it happened, she'd been hearing clapping sounds coming from the bushes and trees near the garage. She had ignored the sounds at first. She asked my husband to check the backyard to see if anyone was there. It was pitch black outside 10 at night, not a light in sight. Reluctantly, my husband grabbed a flashlight and braved the darkness. After a quick look around, he came back, saying there was no one there. But my mother-in-law insisted he check again. This time, he was too scared. He came back inside, locked all the doors, and headed to work. Now it was just my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my 2 daughters, and me at home. My mother-in-law hurriedly closed the garage door and finished cleaning up. My sister-in-law wanted to look out the back door window, but she was too scared, so she asked me to do it. I was nervous, but only because I thought it might be a burglar or thief. I kept thinking, how will I defend myself? We don't have a gun, just knives. Gathering my courage, I peeked out the window. Nothing. Just darkness. After my mother-in-law came inside, she called one of my sisters-in-law, who's a shaman. I also called my mom, a shaman, as well. I told her what happened, and she tried to comfort me, saying it was probably just the neighbor's kids. But I knew it wasn't. It was 10 p.m., and there were bushes and trees all around our driveway. Finally, my mom admitted what I had suspected. It wasn't a living person. It was a ghost. Once my mother-in-law finished her call, she rushed over to my sister-in-law and me. My sister-in-law started panicking, nearly in tears. I had to calm her down, reminding her that spirits feed off fear. My mother-in-law then explained that the ghost was our aunt, her sister-in-law, who had died of a heart attack years ago. Apparently, she was angry because our uncle had recently performed a ritual to keep her out of their house. She was hungry and needed to vent. She tried entering our home, but our spiritual house guards wouldn't let her in. We felt a bit better knowing who it was and why it happened. But the next morning at the farmer's market, something eerie occurred. Our uncle, who rarely came to the market, showed up. My mother-in-law told him about the strange events, and he shared that earlier that morning, he had found his garage door mysteriously open, about knee-high. His chickens, usually locked in their cage, were all released. He found them hiding under the car, shaking, and 2 were missing. My mom had to perform a ritual for my mother-in-law after that. Ever since, my mother-in-law always closes the garage door while preparing her flowers. A few weeks later, my husband told his cousin, a rising shaman, about the encounter. His cousin revealed that a few weeks prior, when he had come over to help my husband fix his car, he had seen her too. He saw the aunt wandering near our road, talking to him, but he ignored her. She even waited near his car as he left, forcing him to race to his car so she wouldn't catch up. He said she was furious because she couldn't get into either her own house or ours. Story 9, Babe, Come Back. Location, Fresno/CA. Sia, UTION. It's a very long story. My sister met her boyfriend through a friend of hers. They went out for their first date. They clicked instantly. There were sparks flying, and it was a magical night. A few weeks later, he asked her out, and of course she said yes. They were the perfect couple, but sadly, it didn't last long. Months passed. There were arguments. It would lead to breakups, but they would get back together. This had been going on for so long. It just passed their anniversary, almost 1 year. Only had a couple of days just passed their special day, and yet the argument has already begun. It got so intense that she couldn't handle it anymore. She broke it off with him. The next day they talked again, but this time it was very different. They treated each other as if they were strangers. They don't call each other babe or hun anymore, but by their names. They didn't talk much, but text here and there. One night he had just gotten off work and said he was going to his boy's place to drink and chill. She didn't want him to go, because she had a bad feeling. But since they weren't together anymore, she couldn't say anything about it. All of a sudden, he stopped texting her. She got upset and stopped texting him. She thought the next day he would call her because he always did, but he didn't call, so she called him and it got rejected. He would never do that. She really thought that he didn't want to be with her anymore because he changed so much. After a night and the whole day had gone by, nightfall came. He finally called her and explained that he lost his phone at his friend's house and that he got drunk. She explained to him that she was so worried and thought they were really over. Out of nowhere, he said he wanted to be left alone. He needed his space. At that moment, her heart broke into pieces. She held back her tears and said that was fine. The next night, she went out with her girls to a party to get her mind off of him. The party was at some place in the woods, in a cabin. It was really pretty, big, beautiful, and peaceful. She had a good time, but her mind was constantly thinking about him, thinking what was he doing at this moment. She told her girls she was going to go use the bathroom and will be back soon. She lied to go get some fresh air to get her mind off of him, and didn't want them to cheer her up and kill their mood. As she got outside, she couldn't help it but kept thinking, and couldn't handle it anymore that she bursted into tears. She started to walk around trying to shake it off. She saw this lake, and there were these American kids swimming, and their parents were having a cookout. There was laughter. They were having a really good time. She just walked by it and didn't care anymore and said, "Someone take me away from this life. I don't want to live anymore. No one wants me. Not my family or my boyfriend. I'll gladly die with no regrets." As she walked back to the cabin slowly, she dried her tears. She was about to open the door when she felt a cold wind. She got inside and asked them when they wanted to leave. They said later. It was almost 3 a.m. and her girls were drunk. She was the DD, so she drove and dropped them off. As she was driving home, she felt someone was in the back seat watching her. She shrugged it off. The OGAs have always said Kovneeg, Siabmimi, is a sign of weakness. You have to be tough. Don't show them a sign of weakness, or they'll take over you. She parked her car in the driveway, took her keys out of the ignition, and opened the door to get inside the house. She felt someone standing right behind her. It was so close to her that she felt it breathing down her neck. She turned and looked, and there was no one. She turned back and opened the door, then went upstairs to shower and get ready for bed. The next week, she felt sick. She said she had a weird dream. She dreamed she was sitting on a rock, just crying, and the lake was right next to her. A handsome man came up to her and asked why was she crying. It's nothing you should be worried about. It's my problem. You shouldn't be here. Him, well, I saw you here being so lonely and Siab, so I came to cheer you up. Thank you, but I shouldn't be talking to you. I have to go home. Him, may I drop you off home to make sure you get home safely? No, it's all right. You should get going too. It's all in Hung, but I don't know how to write in Hmong. He smiled and just stood there. She got creeped out, so she walked away and then woke up. She said it felt so real and thought her dream didn't mean anything. Even if she told Mom, she would just say it was nothing. She just ate too much and dreamed silly things. A couple days had passed by, and her ex called. He asked how she had been and told him she was sick. They talked for a while, and she said felt tired, so she told him she was going to go sleep and will talk to him later. She had another dream. She was in the same place, sitting on the rock, but was just staring at the lake. The handsome man came up to her again and said, in Hmong. Him, do you already have a loved one? Her, why do you ask? Him, because a beauty like you shouldn't be crying and getting your heart broken when the person you love isn't making you happy as you should be. Her, thanks for caring, but I'm happy with him. Him, if you are happy as you said, then why, the other night, were you walking around crying because of him and said you'll gladly die with no regrets? She was so spooked out, she didn't know what to do. Her, how did you know? Him, I was there, but you didn't see me. She woke up right then feeling scared and decided to tell our parents about her dreams. We waited and waited for our parents to get off work. She told my parents what happened, and they yelled at her for being so stupid. They hurried along to call my Texavlob to do a ritual to see what was going on. He came, and my parents told him what happened. Hours later, after the ritual had been done, he said to my parents that the man in my dream was a dragon. He saw her, crying and lonely. He felt her pain and wanted to take her away to be with him. He said they had to find some powerful Tuxib-Neeb to perform a ritual for her as soon possible, or it'll be too late. He knew where she lived at, and dragons are very vicious. It's hard to negotiate with them. He recommended a Tuxib-Neeb that can help, so the next day we'd have to prepare everything, and the ritual will be at night. After this, we went to sleep. She had a dream again about this man. She was at the same place again, but this time she was in the water. It was up to her knee. Him, hello there. Her, hi. Him, what do you think about me? Her, I don't know you. Him, do you like me? Her, you're a very good-looking man, but I already have someone else, sorry. You should find someone who's better than me. I hope you find her. Him, I already did, but she wouldn't accept me. If I take you tonight to be my wife, are you willing to? Her, N.O. I'm sorry, but you should leave. Him. Why should I? This is my home, and soon this will be your home too. Her. Go away. I'm happy with my boyfriend. She woke up feeling sweat all over her. As we did all the preparations to get ready for the big ritual, we waited for the Tuxevi to come. He brought 4 of his assistants and some really weird stuff. I don't know what it was. As they performed the ritual, they told my sister to go over there and sit on the long table. She sat by herself and just waited, as the Tuxevi was throwing rice and spitting water over her. She looked so weak and started to turn pale. She blacked out. While she blacked out, she got up and roared. She told the Tuxevi to back off. If he didn't, he'd regret it. The Tuxevi said, Dabuav Detsuvinyob Nrogdab. Nig Thiab Dabnob Sis Tawake. Yo Koji, Sis So News Loss. Koje Sis Texhob Tu Siab Rao Kov Nob. He did what he had to do to fight off the evil within her. He used his sword on her, and she fell down screaming in pain. She got right back up and tried to attack him but missed. The Tuxevi told his assistants to hold her down while he put something on her. She screamed and roared so loud everyone got scared. She passed out, so we carried her to lay down on the couch. We cried and told her she'd be all right. The assistant said the Tuxevi told them to tell us, or my friends, or whoever, to get a hold of her boyfriend, because the dragon took her spirit so far with him in the other realm. The Tuxevi was trying to get her back. He was calling for her, but she wouldn't answer. If her boyfriend called her back, maybe she would answer. It took us about 30 minutes to get a hold of her boyfriend. I told him what happened, and he rushed driving over to our place. He came and sat next to my sister, calling her name. She was so pale. She was turning blue. He said, Babe, come back. I'm sorry. I need you here with me. Babe. B-A-B-C-O-M-E-B. A C-K-T-O-M-E-R. He called her for quite a while. Everyone was calling for my sister. An hour later, she finally woke up and wasn't so pale anymore. The first person she saw was her boyfriend. He hugged her so tight and yelled at her for being so stupid. She cried, and he cried. Everybody cried. Her, I'm sorry for being so stupid. I love you so much, but without you, I wouldn't know what to do with my life. Him, I'm sorry for hurting you. I wouldn't do that again. Don't you ever do that again. I love you so much. After this is all over, I wanna marry you. Her, crying, it's too late. I've already got to his house. I'm sorry, hun, but I begged him to let me come back to see you one more time and my family one more time before I leave. Him, N.O. It's all right. The Tuxevi is gonna help you. Her, it's too late. I love you so much, but sadly, we can't be together in this lifetime. I wish you the best and find the right girl for you. Please, move on. Him, N-O-O-O. You're supposed to marry me. You're supposed to have my kids. We're supposed to live, be old, and die together, and watch our grandkids. Her, you could do better than me, babe. Him, B-A-B-A. N-O, crying, C-O-M-E-B, a C-K. Everybody cried. Her, tell my family I'm sorry, and I love them very much. We were all crying and blew her head. It was such a heartbreaking moment, but she had left us. We were too late. An hour later, The ritual was done. There was nothing he could do. He had so many guards, and he couldn't beat them. He didn't have enough energy. He said he was sorry and wasn't powerful enough. We did my sister's funeral. Her boyfriend came and sat by her the whole 3 days. He lived an hour away from my sister. He loved her so much. He did almost everything for her. They were the perfect couple, though they have a lot of arguments. He cried non-stop. He was so miserable and vulnerable. I don't know if he had moved on, but it was heartbreaking for them and for my family. She wasn't a perfect sister, but she knew what she wanted. She'd find her way to get it. She was a rebel, but she knew her limits. She wasn't so close to my parents, or to anyone except me. She did so much for us, and we took her for granted and didn't believe in her when she needed our support. I love you, and we're so sorry. If only we could go back in time, I would have been by your side. I love you a lot, sis. May you rest in peace. Story 10. Screams from Hell. I was 15 years old when I experienced something terrifying I still can't fully explain. It was a Sunday night, and after partying with my high school friends, I got home around 11 p.m. Everyone was asleep except for my sister, who opened the door for me since I texted her. I went straight to my bedroom, turned on the fan, and laid down, scrolling through my phone. I was exhausted. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling, probably for about 2 minutes. Suddenly, the fan started getting louder and louder for no reason. By the way, I had closed and locked my door, so I felt secure. But then, out of nowhere, I got hit with sleep paralysis. I couldn't move my body at all. My eyes were wide open, and the fan was deafening. Then I heard it screaming. Not just any screaming. It was like people were being tortured, crying for help. The voices were so loud and clear, like they were coming from right inside the room. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. That's when things got worse. The doorknob started rattling as if someone was trying to break into my room. The banging and the screams, both male and female voices, grew more frantic. I was terrified, completely helpless. My body was frozen, and all I could think was, Yog Thiab Pog Lospov Homkov, Grandpa and Grandma, come protect me. For what felt like an eternity, probably about 4 minutes, I just lay there, forced to listen to these tortured screams and the violent shaking of the doorknob. Finally, I managed to break free. The first thing I did, I threw the blanket over my head. Definitely not the smartest move, but it's all I could think to do. My heart was racing, and I was breathing hard as hell. When I woke up the next morning, I felt sick and completely drained. I never told my parents about it, mainly because it only happened that one time. But even now, I still wonder about those screams. It's something I replay in my mind to this day. Story 11. This is a true story that happened to me. I'll try to keep it simple and short. Please excuse any errors in my writing. I graduated from high school in 2003 and was accepted to UC Berkeley. During my first year, my parents and I constantly argued, and it frustrated me to no end. In a rebellious moment, I decided to join the Marines at 18. I passed all the tests and was preparing for boot camp. But about a week before I was supposed to leave for training, I got sick with a strange illness. It was so bad that I couldn't exercise, and every night I was plagued by vivid, terrifying dreams. For 7 nights in a row, I dreamed of ghosts and demons chasing me. Some dreams were even worse, where they captured me. I didn't tell my parents at the time, trying to stay tough. After all, I was going to be a Marine. Fear wasn't supposed to affect me. A few days before boot camp, I had the worst dream yet. A figure in a long black coat, clearly a demon, was coming to kill me. I shook it off, telling myself it was just nerves. Finally, the day came, and my drill instructor, DI, picked me up in a van. As we drove to the Marine base in San Diego, something strange happened. I passed out and slipped into a coma. I had no idea I was in a coma, but when I woke up in the hospital, I remembered seeing my parents and my DI by my bedside. What disturbed me was that I also saw the figure in the black coat standing in the doorway of my hospital room 187. Confused and scared, I kept asking my parents who that extra person was. My parents looked at me worried and said, "Kojes pebtes poab," meaning you're saying things we don't see. I asked them 6 times, but their answer was always the same. They began to get concerned. Eventually, due to my illness, I had me discharged from the Marines. I spent a week in the hospital, and every day I saw that figure in the long coat standing near my room. No one else seemed to notice. When I was released, my mom and brother picked me up. As we drove from San Diego to Fresno, I asked my mom again about the figure. She insisted there was no one there. My brother chimed in, saying it was probably because I was in a coma and my vision was distorted. We stopped at a McDonald's on I-5 because I was hungry. After eating, I went to the restroom to wash my face. As I lifted my head and looked in the mirror, I froze. The figure in the long coat was behind me, staring at me with a demonic face. Terrified, I bolted out of the restroom and urged my family to leave immediately. That weekend, my parents decided to perform a jingle bell ceremony for me due to my illness and strange behavior. During the ceremony, the shaman threw a cow horn as part of the ritual. One of the horns flew out of the door and pointed upwards. The shaman suddenly stopped, looked at me, and started asking questions about the demon in my dreams. To every question, I answered yes. As the ceremony continued, it became more intense. The shaman called me to sit next to her while she chanted. Strangely, she seemed to be communicating directly with the demon. Her spiritual power battled with the demon for my soul. The ritual involved burning paper money and sacrificing a few chickens. When the ceremony ended, the shaman gave me a heartfelt lecture and began to cry. I reassured her that it was my own decisions that had brought this upon me. She then told me that for my protection, I had to stay inside the house for 1 week and avoid going out. She used a goat's head to protect the house and breast milk to cleanse me spiritually. Since then, I haven't seen the demon or gotten sick. I realize some readers may think I'm foolish, but I wasn't very wise back then. Story 12. A Spirit Unveiled. It started innocently enough. I remember waking up to my mother's gentle voice as she lightly shook me. Tiredly, I forced myself up. After completing my morning routine, I headed downstairs to the kitchen. As I prepared breakfast, I felt this unsettling feeling around me as if someone was watching me sharply. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling persisted. Seeking comfort, I attempted to entertain myself by singing the blues, hoping to shake the eerie sense of being alone. Minutes passed, and I could still feel this wave of horror behind me. Encouraging myself to face my fears, I slowly shifted myself around. Relieved that there was nothing, I returned to washing dishes, but the chilling sensation lingered. Just as I was calming down, I heard faint footsteps approaching. Startled, I spun around expecting something ominous. "What the heck? You scared me," I exclaimed. Irritated, my brother apologized with a sheepish grin and headed into his room. Still annoyed, I returned to my chores. The strange feeling wouldn't go away, clinging to me like stubborn gum on a shoe sole. I urged myself, face your fears. What's the worst that could happen? Steeling myself, I turned around and a shriek pierced the air. My worst nightmare stood in the doorway. A petite lady in black, her skin an unsettling blend of oceanic blue and icy pallor, her long hair cascading down her slender frame. But her face, a blank, expressionless face. I screamed at the top of my lungs, backing away to the counter. Time froze as I stood there, trembling, until my brother rushed to my side. I clutched his white shirt, grateful for his presence, my fear still sensible. "Who's there?" my brother yelled, his voice firm. "Show yourself." I burst into tears, clinging to him as we rushed upstairs to our parents' bedroom. "Mommy, Mommy," I sobbed, throwing myself into her arms. "What happened?" she asked, concern etched on her face. Between sniffling, I recounted the terrifying encounter. My father listened intently, then sprang into action. He grabbed a red cloth, ripped off a strip, and tied it around my neck. "This will protect you," he reassured me. His voice calm and soothing. "No harm will come to you."
As he blessed the red cloth, a sense of peace washed over me.
The fear began to fade, replaced by a feeling of safety and security. We left in a hurry downstairs, and my father guided me to spot where I encountered the spirit. He began to chant, his voice commanding. Days passed, but I wasn't myself. I couldn't bear being alone, always seeking comfort from others. It wasn't until later that I learned the shocking truth. I had been followed by a restless spirit. Story 13. The Beautiful Daughter. My mother once told me a story from her village in Laos about a neighbor's daughter named Pajay. She was known throughout the village for her stunning beauty. Everyone admired her, and all the young men wanted to court her. Since the houses in the village were made of bamboo, my mother said you could often hear men talking to Pajay late into the night. One night, my mother woke up to use the bathroom outside. There were no indoor bathrooms in Laos at the time. As she stepped outside, she heard a commotion. A group of men was abducting a girl. Curious, my mother approached them and saw that it was Pajay, the neighbor's daughter, being taken. Pajay was crying, and one of the men was holding her hand, reassuring her. Sis tex hob quaj, yog kov yu guav tau koji kov yij uav hub koji. Don't cry. If I marry you, I will love you, my mother thought to herself. Oh, love tau, love lam lao. Oh, they've got a son-in-law now, and went back inside to sleep. The next morning, my parents were awakened by the sound of loud crying coming from the neighbor's house. My father told my mother to check on them, but my mother was unconcerned. She told him, "Don't worry, I saw a group of men take their daughter last night. Her mother is probably just upset because Pajay got married." But when both neighbors began wailing, my father decided to check for himself. When he returned, he brought devastating news. Pajay had passed away in her sleep. My mother was terrified and soon became ill. My father had to call a shaman to perform a healing ritual. The shaman revealed that the group of men my mother saw kidnapping Pajay weren't human at all. Because the village had constantly praised Pajay's beauty, a spirit, a dragon, had come to take her as his bride. My mother wasn't supposed to witness the abduction, but because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, she had seen them, and one of the spirits had seen her too. A few days later, Pajay's mother had a dream in which Pajay and her husband came to visit. Paige's husband was incredibly handsome, dressed in a dazzling humong outfit adorned with silver coins. They had come to perform a wedding ceremony and to pay Paige's dowry. Before Paige left, she reassured her mother, telling her not to worry and saying she was happy. When Paige's mother awoke, she found a pile of leaves under her pillow. Thank you for always supporting the channel and welcoming the channel's videos. I wish you good health and remember to subscribe to the channel.